And tonight, we take you to Philadelphia, inside a Starbucks on a spring afternoon that would change the lives of two young men and spark a nationwide debate. It was April 12, 2018. Walnut Street was alive with the usual rhythm of the city. Horns honking, footsteps echoing, the chatter of people rushing by. Inside a Starbucks on the corner, things were calmer. Coffee beans roasted in the air, laptops clicked, cups clinked. Customers sipped, worked, and lingered, just as they always did. Two young black men walked in. Their names were Rashawn Nelson and Dante Robinson. Both 23 years old, lifelong friends, and ambitious real estate entrepreneurs. They weren't there for coffee. Not yet. They were there for a meeting with a potential investor, someone they hoped could take their business to the next level. Starbucks was the chosen spot. Neutral, professional, a place where thousands of business meetings happen every single day. The men found a table and sat down, waiting, quietly, just like everyone else in the room. But within minutes, their presence drew the attention of the store manager. Nelson asked if he could use the restroom while they waited. The manager said no. Restrooms were for paying customers only. Technically, Starbucks did have such a policy, but in reality, people sat for hours without buying a thing, and hardly anyone was ever confronted. Yet, this time, the manager made a decision. She walked over, asked if they wanted to order. They explained. They were waiting for someone. The manager walked away. And then she picked up the phone. Her call to 911 was brief. She reported, two gentlemen refusing to make a purchase or leave. Minutes later, police officers entered the cafe. Their presence was heavy. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Everyone could feel it. Something was off. The officers approached the two men. They told them they needed to leave. Nelson and Robinson calmly explained. They were waiting for a business partner. They weren't causing trouble. They weren't being loud. They weren't breaking anything. They were simply sitting. The officers repeated their demand. The men stayed put. Not out of defiance, but out of principle. Why should they leave? Why should they be treated differently? And then the cuffs came out. Click, click. Two pairs of wrists locked. Two men escorted out of the cafe in front of stunned customers. The room fell silent. Phones came out. A customer's voice cut through the air. What did they do? What did they do wrong? The footage spread like wildfire. By nightfall, it was everywhere. Millions watched two young black men being arrested for the simple act of waiting. The outrage was immediate. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag boycott Starbucks. Hashtag Starbucks while black. People across the country demanded answers. Was this trespassing or racism? The Philadelphia Police Department defended the officers at first. They said their men responded correctly to a trespassing complaint. But as the video spread, the defense crumbled. The public wasn't buying it. For Nelson and Robinson, the experience was humiliating. They described sitting in a jail cell for hours, asking themselves how a simple meeting turned into a national headline. They weren't criminals. They were professionals. Yet, in that moment, they were treated as if their presence alone was a crime. Starbucks, the company that prided itself on inclusivity, suddenly had a PR nightmare. The CEO, Kevin Johnson, went on record calling the incident reprehensible and not representative of our values. The company closed more than 8,000 stores across the U.S. for one afternoon of racial bias training. It was a dramatic gesture, but critics asked, could a few hours of training really undo centuries of racial bias? Or was it just a bandage on a deep wound? When it came to legal action, Nelson and Robinson surprised everyone. They didn't sue Starbucks for millions. Instead, they reached a quiet settlement with the company, which included financial support and even tuition coverage through an online program. With the city of Philadelphia, They went further. They asked for just $1 each, plus a promise that the city would invest $200,000 into a program supporting young entrepreneurs. Their message was clear. This wasn't about getting rich. It was about making change. So, were they guilty of trespassing? The evidence says no. They weren't disruptive. They weren't refusing service. They were waiting, just like countless others did in Starbucks every day. The so-called trespassing charge fell apart under scrutiny. If waiting for a friend is trespassing, then half of Starbucks customers could be arrested daily. But here's the uncomfortable truth. They weren't targeted for their actions. They were targeted for their presence. For who they were. Two black men, in a space where someone decided they didn't belong. The Starbucks case became more than a headline. It became a mirror, forcing America to confront a painful question. If simply existing while black can be treated as a crime, what does justice really mean? Years later, the video is still shown in classrooms, in diversity trainings, in conversations about racial bias. It's a reminder that racism doesn't always scream. It often whispers, hidden in the smallest decisions, the smallest interactions. Nelson and Robinson didn't disappear. They became advocates, speaking about their experience, using their platform to push for change. Starbucks changed its policies, announcing that anyone could sit in its cafes or use its restrooms, whether or not they bought a drink. And the story endures, not just as an isolated incident, but as a symbol, a warning, a question that still hangs in the air. Two men, one cafe, one phone call, one arrest. Were they guilty of trespassing or victims of racism?